I think we're ready to go. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Short, and wanted to welcome you all to the webinar that we will be sharing on the Right Time, Right Care document. And as you are settling in, a few housekeeping items. As this is a webinar format, you won't be able to contribute to the chat, but you can ask questions using the Q&A function. And members of the team will track in English and French and respond to your queries as they can. And we'll only have a short time for questions today, but there'll be many other opportunities to come together to discuss the vision once everyone's had a chance to review the document and reflect. We wanted to let you know today's session will be recorded, and you should by now have all an email with the slides attached, which is especially important for our French-speaking colleagues, as unfortunately that technology won't allow us to have dual French and English screens today, but you do have the slides. And to let folks know, the Right Time, Right Care document will be released following today's webinar on the Knowledge Institute site and later on partner sites through the Lead Agency Consortium, CMHO, and School Mental Health Ontario. And with that, away we go. So as I said, I'm Kathy Short, Executive Director for School Mental Health Ontario and one of the co-chairs of the System Collaboration Working Table that led the development of this vision and document. And in a moment, you'll hear from my colleague, Patrick Dion, Executive Director of the Child and Youth Mental Health Lead Agency Consortium. A little later, we'll introduce you to some other key partners in the work who are here to share information about the development of this document and share their perspectives and their suggestions and their hopes. Together, we'd like to welcome everyone and thank you so much for making time to join this launch of the Right Time, Right Care vision. This meeting is both an end and a beginning. So today marks the ending of a 2-year collaborative effort across our sectors to establish a shared vision that we can all aspire towards to enhance the system of care for child and youth mental health. And it also signals a beginning. So in sharing this with all of you today, we're hopeful that you'll review the vision, reflect on it, and consider how it can support you in your work locally. We're also hopeful that you'll join with us in together making this vision a reality over time. So as we begin, and as we gather from many places, we invite you to take a moment to pause and to reflect. I would encourage you to call to mind the traditional territories from which you're working today and the Indigenous people who have been stewards of this land for thousands of years. The photo on the screen is actually one I took recently from a trail that I walk regularly near my home. I live and work on the traditional territory of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. It's a rural area outside of what's now Hamilton, and the land's covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, and Indigenous nations and peoples and newcomers have been invited onto this treaty with the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Acknowledging the land and showing respect and gratitude is a small act of reconciliation. It's a way to underscore that relationship that Indigenous people have with the land and to acknowledge the colonial legacies and current practices that were designed to erode Indigenous cultures. To remind us all of the responsibilities towards both truth and reconciliation and how we must together center the wellness of Indigenous children and young people in our shared work. Please take a moment as we gather for your own personal land acknowledgement as we ground ourselves in our time together. We also want to acknowledge that as we work to bring our vision for the system of care forward over the past 2 years, we are doing so against the backdrop of the pandemic and instances of racial and social injustice, and through circumstances where those who have been historically marginalized and oppressed in relation to the social determinants of health were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Throughout our work, we tried to center children, young people, and families who have experienced extra burdens of hardship and racial trauma through this time. This included personal and shared reflection on Canada's history, the legacies of colonization and enslavement of Black Canadians, and the impacts that this continues to have in our schools and in our communities. So at this time, we wish to acknowledge our ongoing responsibility to reflect upon our collective history and to work steadfastly to eliminate anti-Black racism at the individual and institutional levels, and to celebrate the strengths and contributions of the almost 1.2 million Canadians who identify as Black, most of whom reside in Ontario and Quebec. And finally, We wish to acknowledge that the work we're sharing is rising up from the work of others who have been creatively building effective systems of care for child and youth mental health and addictions over many years in their communities and regions. We recognize prior efforts like the Student Support Leadership Initiative, that they've been instructive and provide helpful scaffolding for this work. As you gaze at the image on the trail, maybe you see the way the trees seem to form a ladder towards the sky. For me, that's a reasonable metaphor for the upward path that we have together towards the vision of right time, right care. Turn it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, very passionate, very authentic in land acknowledgement, and certainly speaks to the ethos of what we have been up to for these many, not just months, but indeed years. In our time today, we're going to begin with a message from our colleagues at the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. We will share a little bit about our collective journey in arriving at the right time, right care vision. And then we're going to turn it to school and community mental health colleagues, those members of our team who have been participating from the very beginning: Natasha Castor, Linda Dugas, David Hoy, and Diane Walker, although Diane was due to be with us this morning, had an unforeseen event that will prevent her from joining us. And Purnima Sundar, who's been a heavy lifter from the very beginning in our project, will be providing the remarks that Diane would have provided. We were part of this, the working table, as I noted, we'll summarize some of the key elements of how our discussions came together, and some of the highlights for those who have joined us this morning will want to bend their heads around and sink their teeth into. Our partners from the Knowledge Institute and CMHO, who again were there from the very beginning, will then outline next steps towards the implementation, and then we're going to close our time together, perhaps with a few questions. And I'll just remind everyone, this is an opportunity this morning for you to receive a document. Our questions may be limited, but we'll have plenty of opportunity going forward to answer those questions, and we encourage you to use the chat function to put some of those forward. If we can get to them today, we will. Otherwise, we'll certainly be following up with you directly. The journey that has transpired over the course of 2 full years is really symbolic of what can be achieved when the forces of compromise, trust, compassion, and hard work gather together. When we set forth to tackle the aim of improved system collaboration, tensions between the child mental health and school board sectors were rising, to be frank. And in spite of many reasons not to bother, perhaps giving into the human instinct to dig in and hold our ground, an abundance of hope was the catalyst for our success. In just a moment, Kathy, I'll turn it back to Kathy, who will share her perspective on the journey. But first, I offer my congratulations to the many who set aside their biases to begin what became a 2-year journey with the support of our ministry partners, working together to discover pathways to improving the well-being of children, youth, young people, and their families. Back to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Patrick. And I'll just add that at the heart of this work over the past 2 years have been 3 things: goodwill, determination, and a shared North Star, keeping children, young people, and families at the center. The conversations were productive, at times difficult, honest, and required each of us to think differently and to truly understand the view of the other. And through this, relationships were built, trust was built, and that's the sort of foundation that I want to put my ladder on. We're delighted and grateful to be joined by ADM Melanie Cohn from the Ministry of Health, Mental Health and Addictions Branch, and by ADM Clayton Latouche from the Ministry of Education, Student Support and Field Services Branch. Thank you both so very much for being here together. It means so much to have your shared support for the vision for the system of care. And I believe we're turning it to ADM Cohn first.
So thanks so much, Kathy and Patrick. You know, what an incredibly inspiring way to start today's deliberations. And I'm personally just so delighted to have the opportunity to be here today. And, you know, I just really want to thank Thank you for the dedication and hard work to all the project partners, the lead agency consortium, School Mental Health Ontario, the Knowledge Institute for Child and Youth Mental Health and Addictions, and Children's Mental Health Ontario for facilitating this. And I would say that it's not just about the facilitation, but it's about, as you've both articulated, this authentic and open view of how to get there. And so I think that really holds us in good stead as we think about what the promise of this report really is. And really that's what we're here to talk about today. It's about how we actually put into practice these concepts that have come together. And that's what's actually going to help kind of the rubber hit the road, rubber meet the road on this one. So thank you so much to all the working group members and youth and parent advisors for your important contributions. And again, they're not just a moment in time. These are really to set a foundation for action. And we know that many individuals from the child and youth mental health sector have been involved in so many conversations and discussion. And I just want to say that we are inspired by the aspirational vision that's presented in this report, and truly look forward to continued discussions on how we can implement that vision within our respective sectors. And certainly understand and appreciate the need to continue to ensure roles and responsibilities between our sectors are clearly defined and understood, and that the pathways and protocols between schools and community-based sector are developed and communicated clearly, because ultimately this is about getting children what they need and getting them to the best place they can, and really wrapping ourselves around them. And so just to say that we continue to be committed to implementing the roadmap to wellness, which is our plan to create a comprehensive and coordinated mental health and addiction system where high quality, equitable mental health services across the continuum of care are available in a timely manner for children, youth, and their families when and where they need them. And this is a core piece of ensuring that our children are able to do so. And as I said earlier, we really do see this report as a foundation for the ongoing work that's needed, and how we continue to implement the roadmap to wellness and the promise of that vision. And we certainly want to continue to use this work and leverage it as we continue on the next levels of discussion on how we can actually put this into practice. And so I'm very much looking forward to today. And with that, I'll pause and hand it over to my colleague, ADM Clayton Latouche from Ministry of Education. Thanks so much, everyone.
And thank you so much, Melanie, and to Kathy and Patrick for inviting us. And I am reflecting on both your comments, excuse me, as I share mine about when tensions rose, you leaned in rather than pull away. And isn't that exactly what our children and youth need, especially in moments where they're experiencing crisis, where they're experiencing issues of life that certainly bring them challenges that they need support with. They need us to together put aside whatever differences there may be, focus on them and their needs, as Melanie said, and lean in. And so thank you very much for modeling that principle so very well in the way the sectors came together to highlight and work through the issues that can move us forward in this work. So thank you to all the participants that led to the creation of this report. We know that student mental health and well-being is a top priority for our ministry, the Ministry of Education, as it is across government. And we know that good mental health is fundamental to a student's ability to learn and not only succeed in school, but also in life. The Ministry of Education echoes everything that Melanie just talked about on behalf of the Ministry of Health in supporting the aspirational vision articulated so well in this report. And we know that now more than ever, coordination between school boards and community mental health providers is absolutely necessary for us to best support the mental health and of students, and to make the best use of available resources. Schools are the eyes and the ears of the broader mental health treatment and care system. Schools are often the first point of contact for many children, youth, and their families for mental health services and care. And Kathy and Patrick, you talked about the spectrum of children and youth that we serve in our schools. and in the community mental health care sector. Black students, Indigenous students, students who are new immigrants, students from the spectrum of socioeconomic line. And it doesn't matter who they are, they're in our schools, and schools serve a particular function in the system of care. So with approximately 2 million of these children attending the province's kindergarten and grade 12 schools every day, educators play an important role in the mental health promotion of all students. Further, the mental health services provided in schools to support students with mild to moderate mental health needs are part of the overall system of care. It's critical that schools and community partners work together to ensure clear pathways of care, to care, are established for students requiring more intensive services in community. Schools play an important role to support students who transition from community mental health services back to school, and also for those students who are attending school while accessing services in the community. It's important that we set up systems and environments that are supportive of their mental health needs. We all need to work together to support the children, youth, and families, even more so as we move through the pandemic and begin to support the mental health impacts that have surfaced and are continuing to surface rather. On behalf of school boards and ministry colleagues, I do want to acknowledge the good work of our community mental health providers, as you are so very crucial to supporting students who require more intensive services. We couldn't support students and families without your good work, and that's why the partnership between our sectors is so very critical. And this report shows that there is still work to be done for sure, and that coordination and cooperation across the sectors will be key to delivering a client-focused single system of care for children and youth wherever they're located across our province. I look forward to the presentation and to our continued work and collaboration together. And again, thank you so much for including us in the launch this morning.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you, Melanie. Your comments each embody the ethos and the integrity of the process that has been ongoing for 2 years. It's more than just symbolic that our ministry partners are here. It's very substantive. Your remarks were proof of that. And to all the participants who have come to see what we're about to get into in more detail, the implementation of what we put forward this morning will be served well by knowing that both education and health are squarely behind the pathway forward. So let's move our attention to providing with some context for the document and to share something of our journey together. Without being too hyperbolic about how this journey began, it did begin with a phone call. My colleagues, Linda Dugas, who you'll hear from later, and Karen Ingebrigtsen, who at that time were the co-chairs of the Lead Agency Consortium, Purnima Sundar, who is a partner then and continues to be a partner going forward and has certainly been central to this effort, and our partners at CMHO, reached across to Kathy at a time, as I mentioned earlier, when tensions were rising. And Kathy is, for those who have come to know her, and I didn't know her then, but for a name, her enthusiasm was infectious around the many participants. And so we set forth. Not really knowing what we're getting into, but with a commitment to doing it with integrity and cooperation, and here we are. So in August 2020, that process began, and we quickly got to work. The System Collaboration Working Table was formed, it was struck. It was comprised of both an equal number of members from school boards and Lead Agency Consortium, executive directors. And we got to the discussions at a time, to repeat it now a third time, not to be too melodramatic, but when a whole lot of discussion and a lack of cooperation, I think, would have defined the relationship between school boards in many regions, not all, and community mental health providers. But off we went, and the trust and the safety of those discussions really did germinate very early. And so we began meeting on a regular basis until we got to the point where we had an iterative drafts between early January and August, where we were meeting to get input in breakout sessions with lots of input as to how that, now the resource document that we have produced what it had to be mindful of. But we didn't think that there was a danger of, now that we are all kind of speaking together, that we had the danger of speaking in a bit of an echo chamber. So we didn't want to have that continue. We wanted to validate our concerns by striking a reference group, again, with an equal number of new members from both school boards and lead agency consortium participants, to give us their feedback on whether or not we were on the right track. And their very valuable input, including, quite importantly, the voices of students, the very folks, children and youth, young people and students who we were looking to provide a system of care to be supportive of. Their input in both English and in French led us to the document that you will see before you. So we sent what was probably a near penultimate draft to our ministry partners in December 2021, and with some back and forth and some real thoughtful analysis on the part of both ministries, as you heard from both Melanie and Clayton this morning. Here we are to present to you the launch of a document that has the perfect title for the work I think needs to go forward: Right Time, Right Care. And we're going to turn our attention now to getting into that in a little more detail. But first, I'm going to turn it back to Kathy.
Thanks, Patrick. We just wanted to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of the large number of people who gave their time, energy, knowledge, and wisdom to the process. The working group was comprised of over 30 members from school board mental health leadership teams and the lead agency consortium. And together, this collaborative, as Patrick said, identified key issues, and we also broke into smaller teams to discuss and arrive at ways forward. Once the draft was created through the leadership of the Knowledge Institute, and particularly Dr. Purnima Sundar, Alice Hutton, and Gabby Lucent, members of the youth and family reference groups provided input. And then, as you heard, the peer review process brought fresh eyes and new insights to enhance the document. Just one note we wanted to make is that we recognize that the system of care is greater than our two settings, and that many others, hospitals, culture and faith organizations, primary care, et cetera, will also have important roles. But we wanted to start here and to sharpen the focus and hope later to grow from here. So in the next few slides, we actually list for you the names of all of the wonderful folks who put their names forward. And as we move through the slides, you'll note that there's contributors from both education and community mental health, intermediary organizations, and ministry partners and family and youth representatives. You'll note that the peer review group members are highlighted with an asterisk, and that all other members of the system were members of the system collaboration working table. And we're just so grateful to everyone's contributions. And at your leisure, when you look at the slides, you can scroll through and see all of those who helped. But at this point, we will turn it to a few of these wonderful working group members and invite them to introduce themselves as they offer insights into the key elements of the system of care.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Natasha Castor. I am the clinical manager for social work services for Viamont School Board. Okay, so today I would like to just speak about the supporting while we're moving forward to work to strengthen our collaboration, to strengthen the system of care. It is important that we have an anti-oppressive and an equity-focused approach that embedded into our system of care. It is crucial that we center that for the mental health, to support the mental health of children and youth with diverse identities, to address the social determinants of health. So delivering cultural relevant services is a central element of a system of care. However, the current model of youth mental health and addiction services need to be enhanced to be more responsive to the unique needs, strength, and resiliency of children and youth. To be more responsive to the strength, resiliency of children and youth from diverse background, cultural, racial, gender, and faith, and linguistic backgrounds also. So the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has really showed the disproportionate impacts of equity-deserving communities, and for the need for a system of care to be more clear and visible in addressing systemic oppressions. As we are still navigating and moving forward through the pandemic, we have a collective responsibility for deep understanding of the role played by social determinants of health and influencing our understanding of equity, and to be more intentional in seeking opportunities to be anti-oppressive and equity focused. So in providing high quality, strength-based identity affirming mental health support need to be available to all children and youth from diverse backgrounds across the continuum of care. For that, we need to align our system change within and across sectors to include diverse voices and perspectives. We need to identify areas of our practices that are systematically biases towards a more Western ways of thinking, rooted into more colonial mindsets, and missing opportunities to incorporate other ways of knowing and to be truly identity affirming. So an anti-oppressive and equity-focused mental health system requires us to really pay attention to the infrastructures of our organizational changes, and really to pay attention also to the service component and the partnership that we are developing with diverse stakeholders, and to focus and to strengthen the commitment to listen and to develop a system with our community partners that brings different ways of knowing and thinking. So it is important for the populations where schools and community-based mental health agencies who have historically caused some harm and perpetuate some oppressive practices that have traumatized really children, youth, and their families, to recognize that systemic oppression and discriminations really can result into persisting harm across time and generations. So while we're moving our efforts forward to improve the well-being needs and to support identity affirming and trauma-informed care, we should also think about promoting protective factors that includes really providing care that really encompass culture, values, practices, and knowledge. So there are several new approaches that are emerging from that can help communities and schools to reduce oppressions and enhance equity. So these approaches really range from a broad action frameworks in mental health that specifically, address that can also specifically address the unique needs and equity focused, deserving focus group. So we need to align our systems change with decisions and directions that with diverse partners. And this spirit, it is important that equity and inclusion within child and youth mental health and addictions be addressed, and we'll have some practical example and consideration that will be presented during within the document. Thank you. So I'll move it to my colleague. I think it's David is next.
It's me, c'est moi, Natasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Zuga. I'm the Executive Director of COMPAS, which is the Child and Youth Mental Health Lead Agency for the districts of Sudbury and Manitoulin. Je veux juste laisser savoir mes collègues francophones, ça me fait un grand plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui, de participer au lancement du rapport Bon Soin au bon moment. So welcome. So I will be speaking on the roles and responsibilities. Now, for a system of care to be successful, it's important that we have a good understanding of what the services are and to bring clarity to our respective roles and responsibilities within that system. And what does it mean to be successful? It means that children are getting the right service at the right time in the right setting. Now, I just want to state that this is really aspirational, and this might not be the current state in your service areas. But we see this as an opportunity just to start the conversation and really look at those opportunities where we can collaborate and we can really create a seamless system for our children and young people that we serve. Now, on this slide, you see a systems approach to our system of care. Now, the collaborative working group chose this type of model because we felt that it was a quick visual guide to really identify the services in their intensity, as well as provide us the roles within different settings. Now, if you look at this diagram, it has 4 tiers, and level 1 and 2 is where we see promotion, prevention, and early identification that really mostly is delivered in school settings. Now, when we move into level 3, we see that there is a small number of children that are being serviced in the schools. And these are our children that are presenting with moderate symptoms. We know that not all children can have access, for whatever reasons they are, can really have access to services outside the school setting. So we understand that these services may need to be offered within the school. So that could be assessment, counseling, and therapy, and crisis services. At the level 4, this is really a priority population for children, child and youth mental health organizations. As you know, or may not know, that child and youth mental health organizations provide a basket of core services to the mild, moderate, and intensive needs children and young people. We know that child and youth community-based organizations, they provide services to these children and young people within the family context, in the community, and in other settings. Now, I really want us to pay attention at the arrows, and I think this is of the whole diagram, I think this is probably the most important part of the diagram. As you see, there is a place in that diagram where we both navigate levels 2 and 3. And we see that there's some really good opportunities for us to collaborate in that space, because this is where we can create the seamless system for children and youth. Now, and I'm just going to give you a brief example. We both provide brief services. So in the community setting, brief services are often the referral pathway to other services in the child and youth mental health system. For school-based services, brief services can lead to more of the other types of services within the school system, but it can also be a referral pathway to a child or youth that will require more intensive services. Now, I think for community-based organization, I think this is an opportunity for us to create those connections and explore opportunities for that warm handoff, so that when a youth or a child is accessing that service, it's not a redundancy in services. It's really an opportunity for them to not say their story a second time and to access the service that they really, really need. Now, when we look at if you look at the circle around the diagram, this is really the other services that we both access, that both sectors access, you know, whether it's child welfare, hospital-based services. So those are our partners that we engage in ensuring that we are meeting the needs of our children and youth. Now, like I said, this is an opportunity to begin a conversation, and so we hope that, and I do know that Pranima and Kathy Pranima will be sharing that at a later slide. We see this, we're hoping that we as communities will be able to come together and really use this diagram to support some of our conversations to create to improve our system of care. So thank you, merci. And I'll now pass it on to our next presenter, and that's David.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, my name is David Hoy. I am the manager of social work services, mental health lead at the Hamilton-Warmouth District School Board, and I've really appreciated being part of this project. Young people and families have told us that it is challenging to know what support is available within their community, and how frustrating it can be for them to have to repeatedly tell their stories when they are seeking support. To best meet the needs of Ontario's young families and our young people and families, we must work toward an interconnected system of care that keeps our young people in the center. Pathways to, from, and through care act to clarify the roles and responsibilities where services overlap. Structure matters, communication matters. Components of internal pathways include access, screening and assessment, service that is provided, and collaborative transitions. Access must be equitable, inclusive, available, affordable, acceptable, and appropriate. Screening and assessment should include equity-focused tools that reflect trauma-informed principles and recognize cultural expressions of mental health symptoms while recognizing the unique experience of diverse individuals and communities. Service should be provided in the least restrictive and most clinically appropriate setting using evidence-informed and equitable approaches to care. Collaborative transitions can increase transparency and engagement, allowing young people and their families to provide input, ask questions about the change in care, and understand what is being communicated between services. And with that, I will turn it over to Purnima.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we know the science tells us about how to implement or how to introduce changes into communities. Because for many service areas or communities, this isn't the way that services are currently structured. And a system of care is a new thing that needs to be implemented. And in order to make things stick or make practices or processes happen in an evidence-based kind of way, we look to what we call drivers or factors that we know contribute to positive implementation and implementation that helps us to ensure that we are delivering the best care to children, young people, and families. So I won't go through all of them because I think that we're all quite familiar with all of these drivers from other settings and other work that we've done together. But I'll just highlight a few. I think one of the things that's really, really foundational, and I think we've seen through this process, is this notion of commitment, and commitment at all levels. So commitment from ministry. So we had our ministry representatives here today, really showing their commitment to advancing what has to happen next. We also need commitment from staff. So commitment from people that are actually implementing these practices on the ground and introducing those changes. And we need commitment from leaders. So leaders from schools, leaders from community-based organizations who are committed to resourcing and supporting the changes that need to happen in order for a system of care to actually truly take hold in any one community. I think cross-sectoral communication, protocols and agreements and so on are really foundational. And those are really a good reflection of strong partnerships. So I think, again, throughout the last 2 years of working together, we've seen that we can work extremely effectively and efficiently together in partnership across sectors. And I think that that's, again, another implementation driver that needs to be in place. And that's what the evidence tells us is foundational. Finally, I think that one of the training is obviously very foundational as well, and that links back to leaders supporting investments in training and supporting folks to engage in ongoing coaching and development that helps that training to take hold. But I think one of the things we really need to make sure is in place are these robust data systems. It's really important to understand, who is being served, who's not being served, and in order to understand that truly, and then to make changes to make sure that people are being served appropriately, we need good data systems. And so that's another foundational implementation driver that we need to work towards. And finally, intermediary organizations and technical assistance. I think one of the things I'm often reminded of is the important work that you folks on the ground are doing to support young people and families, and the, I think, important role that we have as intermediary organizations, ourselves and School Mental Health Ontario and CMHO, to really help you all to do the best work that you can do. So helping to provide that technical assistance, helping to lead practices and processes alongside you all. I think those are really important functions of an intermediary organization that can help to ensure that this new process or this new set of practices truly takes hold. So I think on that note, I will shift it over to Carrie Smock, my colleague from CMHO, who will tell us a bit about what's next.
Thanks so much, Purnima, and hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Smuck, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Children's Mental Health Ontario. So now that we've learned a little bit more about the objectives and processes and a little bit on drivers for implementation, as well as the work group and peer review in developing the Right Time, Right Care document, we wanted to talk a little bit about what happens next. So you've already heard today that Right Time, Right Care establishes that aspirational vision for how our schools and community-based organizations work together to support child and youth mental health and addictions around that system of care. So with these foundations in place, we turn our minds to what the opportunity is before us. We want to collectively think through implementation as we go forward, and that's the work ahead of us. It's a critical next step, and it's one that we really view as being ongoing. It should consider how we support leaders to bring the vision of the document to life in local communities and how we work together going forward. Pranima, I know you wanted to add a little bit here as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the things, thanks very much, Carrie. One of the things that both Kathy and Melanie and also Patrick referenced right at the beginning of the session is that this is not an end to this work. This is both a beginning, but also, this is both an end, but also a beginning to actually implementing these changes. And in January, we had some preliminary conversations with members of the working group about what might be needed in order to support the work to actually realize this system of care, to actually put this system of care in place. We also wanted to acknowledge what already exists in communities that we might be able to build upon, and talked a little bit about how our partners across the Lead Agency Consortium, School Mental Health Ontario, our Knowledge Institute, and CMHO can help to support that process. So we put it to both the working group and our peer review partners to try and understand what critical sort of next steps we need to take. And they were really clear. We need supports around implementation. So a really clear implementation plan with the appropriate resourcing required to actualize it. We need resources around communication. So how do we actually enable those communications to take place between schools and community-based organizations? And we need processes in place for evaluation. So how do we know we're actually implementing a system of care and that it's producing the good outcomes for young people that we're hopeful that they will produce? We also talked about the critical and essential engagement of families and young people that need to be a part of this process right from the get-go. And so all of our implementation practices moving forward will need to ensure that we have youth and family around those tables. So what we envision implementation looking like is probably a collection of tools, collection of resources, some concrete things that you can use to guide your work together, but perhaps also some individuals, some consultants or champions within communities who might be able to help you to support those collaborations. Folks may recall this notion of a critical friend in the education sector. So somebody who's able to walk alongside people who are making those changes and provide appropriate supports as required. So at this point, what we're doing, again, this is a little bit sort of, this is what we're envisioning. We're not sure exactly what this is going to look like. So we are at a bit of a point where we'd like to invite participation from others. We have a list that we've been adding to. So if any of you on the line are interested in being a part of an implementation group moving forward, please do get in touch with any of us. So myself, Kathy, Patrick, Linda, anybody that is any of the presenters today would be happy to funnel you over to us at the Knowledge Institute. We're actually collecting all of these names, and we'll be back in touch with folks to get that work going. So maybe I'll pass it over to, I think, Kathy and Patrick to close us out today.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Pranima. As noted, it is a beginning and it's an end, the end of one ladder and the beginning of another, one that includes all of you as we move towards the vision we've collectively imagined. And as Pranima said, it's an invitation. As you read it, as you reflect on it, things will come up, and we're really eager to hear what comes up for you, what you see is missing, where do we need to put more energy, how do we need to work together to get this right. So we're really excited to share the document with you. We'll make the link available after the session. It's aspirational, it's bold, it will look different in different communities, and it will take all of us to get there. But if we think like a system and together wrap our shared and unique expertise around children, young people, and families, we firmly believe we can achieve this vision for those that we serve. And Patrick, I'll turn to you for last words.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm not sure that much more need be said, but let me start with un grand merci à tous. Thank you to everyone who has participated in bringing us to this point. All of the participants today, some 150 of you, your interest is affirmation for us that this is important work. The disagreements we've had in the past notwithstanding, I feel confident that the evidence I've seen about men and women who have dedicated their professional lives to the well-being of children, young people and their families to improve their lives is an ongoing journey. And while I think the one antidote to disagreement is more discussion. And while we've had disagreement in the past, the discussion we've had over the course of the past 2 years and the discussion we've had again here this morning leaves me hopeful. And sometimes in a pandemic where hope was scarce, we have great hope, Kathy and I, about how we have moved forward with our partners to bring us to the point we are today. Special thanks before turning it to questions. We did say that we would leave a little time at the end for questions at a high level. Let me thank our partners, all the members of the steering committee and collaboration table, or working table rather, the Knowledge Institute, Purnima and Gabby and Alice, who has no longer involved in the project, but did some very important work throughout. Thank you to all of you. Your dedication to this has made Kathy and I look very, very good over the course of many years, many months. To CMHO, my partner in the LACS work, thank you to Carrie. Mary, you followed in after Kim Moran took her leave. Mary has been the interim CEO at CMHO. She's here with us today. Didn't speak this morning, but is certainly ever present. Mary's kind of concluding her time as interim CEO. And to you, Mary, I wish you many fortunes in your endeavors. Maybe this is finally retirement for you, Mary, which is probably what your husband's delighted to hear. And to my colleague, Kathy Short, I spoke earlier of how we had not yet met before that important phone call. And whatever might spring from this document, I can now say I consider you to be not only a trusted colleague, but a dear friend. And so thank you to all our ministry partners. Your words were indeed key to this, and we're going to be holding you to that. And that's not a threat. That's just a statement with every likelihood that will take place. So Gabby, I think you and Lisa have been watching the chat function to see whether there are questions. Kathy and I are going to do our best in the 10 minutes we have remaining before the webinar wraps up to address some of those. The questions may be directed, if not to Kathy or me, to those who presented in each of their segments. And I remind you that questions both in English and en français are both welcome. So if it's your preference to ask your question en français, or we answer the question en français, we'll turn to either Natasha or Linda to provide an answer to those questions. So Gabby, if you're able to come on the screen, or Lisa to tell us, maybe read some of those questions so that we can engage in that, I invite you to do so now.
Thanks so much, Patrick and Kathy, and all of our speakers this morning. There have been a few questions in the Q&A, some of which we have responded to directly, but there certainly are a few others. So in the time that we have left, happy to bring those forward and also just facilitate some back and forth. I wonder if actually, instead of paraphrasing the question, if I could turn to Sean Quigley. You posed a question related to considering the needs of young people and substance use prevention. And I wonder if you wanted to just take this opportunity to come on camera and pose your question.
Can folks hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we run a substance use and addiction service within our jurisdiction, and we're fortunate enough to have substance use and addiction counselors in our local school boards. I've been concerned for quite some time with the lack of acknowledgement when we talk about mental health, that addictions and substance use doesn't necessarily get included in that. So I'm just wondering if that has been a focal point of this conversation, as well as sort of an offshoot to that, has there been given any consideration to the ongoing disciplinary procedures that we use towards young people that are engaging in substance use and addictions, as opposed to young people who are struggling with mental health and addiction issues? How come we're still suspending and expelling? Thank you.
Sean, maybe I can begin with the first part of your question, and Patrick, please feel free to chime in. I think it may be an error in my words as I describe some of these when I say mental health, and I think every time I should be saying and addictions. And I think you'll note when you look at the document that that it is inclusive of substance use prevention and in that type of work as well. So it is meant to be reflected in the document. But as you go through, please reach out and let us know if there are gaps in what you've seen. Patrick, I don't know if you wanted to add to that thought.
Yeah, only to add, Kathy, and that is certainly puts it in its proper context. I know that some of the work I've done, Sean, has been at a time when the discussion around mental health has not been quite as mainstream as it is today. I see that the discussions around substance use disorder, what I think we now use clumsy language to describe addictions. I think it's probably a shift that we need to make in our discourse around how we discuss illnesses like substance use disorder in the context of children and young people. And I think questions like yours continue to remind us that we have work to do. And I know that from the lead agency consortium viewpoint, there's a great deal of work and indeed discussion that takes place in terms of how les deux are treated. And so thank you for the question. Let me give you some assurances that I don't know how to address the disciplinary aspect of the question that you pose, but I think getting to that question and a solution for that very blunt instrument comes with the understanding that this is not a character flaw, but indeed an illness, substance use disorder. And with that, we can start to address mental health and substance use disorder a little bit more humanely.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Patrick. Another question in the Q&A that I'd like to bring forward for an opportunity to respond from Kathy Sadeo Jarvi. I hope I've said that correctly. I'll just read your question, Kathy. Is this a vision that is expected to be implemented in all 33 lead agency service areas, or based on each of the 72 school boards, or on a provincial level?
Would you like me to start again, Patrick, or do you want to?
Yeah, in fact, Lisa, I have to confess, I didn't follow the question. So before we do respond, can you just read that question again, Lisa, so I'm not giving an answer that I misunderstand the question?
Absolutely. Is the vision that is expected to be implemented in all 33 lead agency service areas, or is it based on each of the 72 school boards, or is it at a provincial level?
Yeah, okay, I understand it now. Thank you. Go, please proceed, Kathy.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for the question. It is a vision that we collectively have imagined provincially, but the intent is that it would play out across the province locally in the nuanced way it would need to happen. So knowing that different communities and different compositions of various school boards and lead agencies will come together in the ways that they do, that this is meant to be a bit of a guidepost, a way to make those conversations happen in helpful ways. And so it's sort of a broad vision enacted locally. That would be my response. But Patrick, again, please, over to you.
That was a very crystalline reply. Kathy, I suppose the benefit, if there is one, that the lead agency consortium has is that there are 33 service areas, and therefore, as it turns out, 31 executive directors that manage the 33 service areas. But there are multiple school boards, some more near double. And so those conversations that happen, as Kathy's described it, at the regional and local level, will certainly be guided by the resource that we've produced. And we expect that it will be maybe need some tailor fitting in the case of, certain regions where multiple school boards and a lead agency consortium and their core service providers engage in the delivery of care. So I don't think there's a neat answer as to a yes or a no, but all of the above. But the spirit that has defined this discussion that has led to this launch today will also be expected in those discussions that you'll be having as you get your head around what we've recommended in this resource document and how to implement that to the benefit of children, young people, and their families.
And I guess maybe I'll just add, Patrick, and it sort of picks up on a point that Pranima made earlier, is that sort of your next step, we hope, would be that you'll take some time to read the document, to think about what that might look like, and that we're anticipating many more sort of interactive conversations. Today was a bit one way, but once you've had a chance to reflect on it, that there would be more opportunity for discussion and dialogue and tweaking and nuancing and that sort of thing. And that might happen in a large space like this, or it might happen more regionally. And so we're really going to evolve the rest of it together with all of you.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Patrick. And there also is expressions of gratitude and thanks in the Q&A for the information that's been shared today. So we'll turn it back to Pranima to close us off.
I just want to thank everyone for having joined us today. I think Kathy, Patrick, thank you so much for your leadership on this work. Thank you to all of the people who have been involved at all stages of this really important work. I think 2 years is a long time to be collaborating, and I think this really has been a labor of love and collaboration. And I'm really, really excited for us to be working together on next steps. I've already had some emails from people that are interested in joining the implementation work, and we're so grateful for that. We recognize that this is on top of an already very busy workload that folks carry every single day to support Ontario's young people and families, and just want to express our gratitude for this. Again, if you have any questions, all of our email addresses are up there on the screen, and you can please feel free to get in touch with any one of us. I also want to send out a very grateful shout out to Gabby Lucente, who is my colleague here at the Knowledge Institute, who's done all of the work to really put this webinar together, and she's kept us all in line and organized and ready to go. I also want to thank Sherry Sim, who has been a huge support, who has helped us many, many times to organize many sessions and conferences, and we're so pleased that she was available to help us to coordinate today's session. So maybe I'll turn it back over to Kathy and Patrick for some final words. Thank you all.
I said all I've had to say, Kathy. If you have a final word, let's have it. Otherwise, we can.
Just hope thanks for coming. Hope everyone has a great day and a lovely weekend. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for coming. Bye for now.